For 2,000 years, Europe has been divided by constant conflict and war. What people don't realize is that, amazingly, this was caused by one great Germanic leader named Arminius, who, in 9 AD, rose up against the Romans and won. Arminius' leadership skills in his Battle of Teutoburg Forest created a legacy that remains even today, a fundamental, long-lasting cultural divide impacting borders, language, religion, and causing hostilities and conflict throughout Middle Europe for thousands of years.
Rome fell back upon the Rhine, and the Rhine became the empire's frontier, so giving birth to a rift in the center of Europe between two groups of nations, the Romanic and the Germanic. The rift is with us still. But if you trace this rift back and back and back, you come eventually to the Teutoburg forest.
The Roman Emperor, Augustus, decided to protect his eastern border by taking over the Germanic tribes east of the Rhine. The Etruscan tribes believed that they should ally themselves with the enemy for the safety of their people. In order to ally, Rome demanded a tribute of noble blood. Arminius was a Etruscan prince taken at the age of 10 to be brought up as a Roman and expected to one day return to his homeland to represent Rome and its power. Arminius was an exceptional soldier and quickly learned how the Roman army worked. He rose quickly through the ranks, eventually leading his own auxiliary. After showing excellency in the field, he was even knighted. He is now a Roman citizen and followed the Roman lifestyle. When Augustus appoints Publius Cornelius Varus as the new governor of Germania, he orders his impressive Germanic leader Arminius to go at his side. In 7 AD, at the age of 24, Arminius comes back to his homeland. However, somewhere between 7 AD and 9 AD, while in Germania, Arminius secretly decides to lead the Germanic tribes in a revolt. No one knows why he did this. Was it for revenge for being taken so young, or in anger after seeing his tribesmen treated so badly by the Roman army? Or was it for his own power? Did he see an opportunity in Germania to unite the angry tribes and become king? No one will ever know why he chose to lead, but there's no doubt that this decision to betray Rome cemented his legacy forever.
He must have had a great deal of charisma. People must have thought, this is the man who can make the changes we want in Germania.
He must have been a charismatic leader to be able to persuade the tribes to unite and fight against Rome. Not only have the tribes been warring with each other for hundreds of years, but they were outnumbered and had inferior weapons. Arminius was a military genius, and he used his friendship with Varus and his loyal auxiliary as an advantage. When the Roman legions marched back to their winter quarters, Arminius set his plan in motion. A rumor of an uprising was created, and Arminius volunteered to take his auxiliary to scout ahead. But instead, they took care of the Roman lookout stations and burned their towers to make it look like Arminius had run into the rumored uprising. Varus saw the smoke and made a fatal mistake to go through the forest and come to Arminius' aid. The forest was a dangerous place for the Roman army. It was completely unsuited to Roman military tactics and logistics. They became slow, lost formation, and became tired in the thick overgrowth as they struggled to move their wagons and support. And most importantly, their column became extremely stretched. Arminius' plan was to push the Roman column through several guerrilla attacks over many days, driving them towards the narrow space of 80 meters with the forest on one side and swamp on the other. When the tribesmen ambushed the Romans, Arminius' auxiliary also turned and attacked. After 3 days of hit and run, the tired Romans were annihilated. Arminius' victory is unprecedented. A small group of tribesmen wiped out 3 legions of the Roman army, 10% or roughly 20,000 men. Rome never rebuilt these legions, and they never again controlled the east of the Rhine.
It is amazing that a young man of 25 could defeat a superpower. It is quite astonishing.
Arminius was an undisputed liberator of Germania, and yet he was assassinated 12 years later by his own people. Arminius tried to unite Germania, but the freedom-loving tribes didn't want to be ruled.
When we look at a number of the other defeats in Roman history, what's interesting with this one is it so very explicitly actually stops a pattern of expansion in one area, and that has very long-lasting consequences.
This is the point where Europe is split in two. By keeping the Romans from crossing the Rhine, Arminius' most important legacy was that the Romans never centrally controlled or Latinized the Germanic tribes.
Were the Germans winners or losers? That is perhaps a matter of opinion. Yes, they did win their freedom, but there was a price to pay. Rome had almost pulled the Germans into history. Arminius cut the cord, and they slipped back into prehistory, into tribalism, lawlessness, and barbarism.
They wouldn't speak Latin and continued to war with themselves. They stayed fractured and vulnerable and would be invaded again and again. An unintended part in Arminius' legacy was that their culture also remained illiterate. With no known written account of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, Germanic history, or their greatest leader and liberator, Arminius, was completely lost for centuries. Until a cardinal by the name of PICCOLOMINI became the sole owner of the lost book Germania by Roman historian Cornelius Tacitus around the mid-1400s. In Germania, Tacitus not only mentions Arminius' victory, but he also describes the old Germanic tribal culture as opposite to the Romans. They were simple and conservative people who did not have the Romans' desire for flamboyancy and excess. He described many other positive traits. He also said some unflattering things. In 1446, a German clergy member sent Piccolomini a list of complaints implying Rome's greed was degrading the German people.
1,000 ways are thought up by which the Roman Church ingeniously squeezes us for gold, as if we were barbarians.
Upset, Piccolomini wrote a response, quoting only the unflattering parts from his new book. He argued that they were barbarians, and they had Rome to thank for bringing them out of the dark. The people in the Germanic states were enraged, and they demanded to read Germania for themselves. Thousands of reprints were made, and Arminius was reintroduced to his people once more. In the 1600s, Germania was still limping along as a group of ununified states. France, England, and Spain were centralizing and nationalizing their power on one side, and the Holy Roman Empire was squeezing them culturally and financially on the other. Arminius became a strong symbol of how they could unite and win. Even Martin Luther, a German friar who was upset at the Holy Roman Empire, seized on Arminius' renewed popularity. He renamed him Herman and used him as a symbol of his Reformation, which ultimately led to the 30 Years' War and eventually the downfall of the Holy Roman Empire. From the 30 Years' War to Napoleon, German inhabitants suffered from repeated French invasions. Again, these humiliations caused the Germans to look at the Teutoburg Forest as their finest hour. The French spoke a romantic language. Napoleon even presented himself as a Roman emperor. Arminius' victory is the symbol of Germanic triumph over the flamboyant Latins. He is still a rallying cry when in 1840, French Prime Minister Adolf declared all territories west of the Rhine was theirs. A song called The Watch on the Rhine becomes hugely popular, sparking tremendous nationalism and eventually leads to the Franco-Prussian War. But unfortunately for Arminius' legacy, the song became the national anthem of Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler fancied himself as the next Arminius, and Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the extermination camps, used a passage in Germania as the quote-unquote Bible as an excuse to murder 6 million innocent Jews. Tacitus states that Germans possess fierce blue eyes, tawny hair, and huge bodies, as well as observing that
the peoples of Germania had never been tainted by intermarriage with any other nations, and stand out as a race distinctive and pure.
This dark part in history caused Arminius' story to be buried again, but with the discovery of the site of the lost battlefield in Teutoburg Forest in 1987, his legacy and leadership is being rediscovered once again. Arminius tried to create a unified Germany and failed, creating instead a divided Europe and a continent which would struggle for centuries looking for peace. Whether he chose to lead for power or for the sake of his people, his legacy is that he changed the course of history as we know it. As the historian Major Fuller says,
had Germany been for 4 centuries thoroughly Romanized, one culture, not two, would have dominated the Western world. There would have been no Franco-German problem, no Charlemagne, no Louis XIV, no Napoleon, no Kaiser Wilhelm II, and no Hitler.